This week's guest on the podcast is an amazing relationship coach, Darren Bruce. He is an expert in this area, and I personally am so excited to hear from him because I have learned a lot from Darren through my beautiful partner Ryan, working with Darren, and just all of the amazing things you've brought to our relationships and the tools that we have and the way that we're able to connect at a deeper level. It's just been so amazing for our relationship, and therefore had a ripple effect into other areas of our life, because we know how important relationships can be for health, which we're going to dive into today. Super excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for being here today, Darren, and I can't wait to hear all of your expertise and what you have to share with us.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure, and super happy to hear that. Yeah, been able to help. And now that you say that, I have the question, because you were asking me of how has that, I'm curious, how has that benefited your health, if at all?
Yeah. Well, I feel like when it comes to relationships and the happiness of the relationship and the ease of the relationship, that can really, when you're stressed in a relationship, that impacts your health negatively, because stress is such a negative thing for all areas of health. It's one of the leading causes of illness and disease and all these kinds of things. So when we remove some of the stress from a relationship, we're removing stress from our life, and we're feeling better, we're feeling happier, things flow easier, we're able to have more clear conversations and better communication. So it's removing the stress essentially, or giving us the tools to handle conflict when it comes up. So it's just supportive of our nervous systems. It's supportive of our mood, of our wellness, of helping us work together to create our dream relationship, really. And the happiness and excitement and flow that comes from that, as opposed to butting up against the challenges that relationships can bring without the tools and without the knowledge, without the insight and the self-awareness. So I think that's how it's really benefited from a health perspective, really, by helping to remove some of the stress that can come with relationships at times.
That's awesome. I remember I said to you when we were talking about doing the podcast, the studies show that we lose 4 years of our life from having a stressful, it's consistently stressful relationship, right? And not knowing how to get through that conflict without as much stress. So that's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's huge. And when you said that it was 4 years off your life, that really just set in with me how much it can impact. And on one level, I kind of knew how bad stress was for us, but then thinking about it in a stressful relationship perspective, it's so fascinating. Just 4 years, that's a huge amount of time when you think about it.
Yeah.
So if we can improve our relationships and really remove some of that stress and make sure the relationships are fully in alignment and flowing and feeling good, it's going to benefit our life quality for when we are alive, and hopefully increase our lifespan too, or not take away from it, at least.
100%. In my experience as well, we're always practicing everything that we're experiencing. So it's if we're having this kind of problem in a relationship, the more we let it go on and be the same, then the more we're practicing that.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that myself until I was able to, resolve it or discover a tool of how to change this, of how I communicate or treat someone, or my emotional intelligence, which is really that as the core, that's the core foundation that amazing relationships built off of everything. So just keeping that practicing in mind has really, had me focused on, what better time to do it than now. If I'm practicing being annoyed or being upset or reacting in this way, I'm just going to get better at practicing that. So I need to start practicing something else, and I might need some help with it.
Yeah, amazing. And I'd also love to really hear about your story and what got you into the relationship coaching space. But before we do, a question that's come up in my mind is, why do relationships trigger us so much? Why are there times where relationships bring some of the more stressful things to the surface, or can bring triggers with them? Obviously not always, but I find relationships can be a real mirror and can really shine the light on the inner stuff that we personally haven't dealt with. But I'd love to hear your kind of take on that.
Well, the person that we found reminds us of the people we grew up with in our family, whether that was a sibling or whether that was a parent. We've found someone who is familiar to us. And most people will actually be in a relationship with someone that is brother, sister, or mother, father, or grandparent, or something like that. The traits that they have, I often think about how in movies and stuff they say, oh motherfucker, like some really dysfunctional like stuff is like someone's like having sex with someone reminds them of their mum, because like that's when they feel that's like the best way they've learned how to function and connect with someone, because they're not consciously aware of like how to find someone who we can be completely independent, but then be able to rely and support on each other without losing our sense of self, and having that kind of like, you know, blaming someone else or believing that they make us feel something. And I guess that's the first step, is realizing that no one makes us feel anything, right? We can have a negative experience and feel negative or positive around someone, but the person isn't making us feel that. It's about like how they're behaving, and obviously then we need to navigate that and learn, okay, when you act like this, I feel like shit, whatever, good. But yeah, it essentially like reminds us of who was in the family. And so, you know, if there's sometimes things we need to learn in order to be relating or communicating better, or really to get anything we want, right? But sometimes there's things we need to unlearn that we don't even know that have been going on in our family, just passed down. Like it's so funny, like I read a children's book to my 3-year-old. Have you ever heard of the Mr. Men books?
Yeah.
So these Mr. Men books I read when I was a kid, and now I read it to her, and I have to change what some of the things are saying, because they're shaming the way that they're getting the Mr. Man to do something differently is like shaming, or, you know, creating fear so that they'll change.
Oh no.
And this just shows like I never knew anything about that, but I was learning at my age. I read all the Mr. Men books with my parents and stuff. Now I thought, oh, that'd be cool to reread. And now I'm like, holy shit, you know, there's all of these sort of stories that are based off of shame and fear, because we don't get it. Like our parents and our grandparents, they are the result and the byproduct of going through 2 massive wars. It's crazy, you know. A lot of the men, we don't. I think part of the reason that so many men don't have emotional intelligence, or, you know, suicide rates, etc., is because we had this big gap for like maybe like 30 or 40 years worth, where majority of men, they went to war and they died. Like we lost heaps of those men. So a lot of the women had to just raise those kids. And so now what we are, like what we had as a role model, what we were seeing and everything, like a man could easily have been overmothered and underfathered, you know, because we know from the data that we need both of those parent figures. And nothing to say like this isn't disrespectful to same-sex couples or anything, because they can still play those different roles.
Yeah.
We just need those 2 people that are caring for them to develop the you know, the resilience, the emotional intelligence, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's really commonly overlooked, that we missed, like a lot of the men were gone and we just didn't have those male role models. So I think a lot of women feel unsafe, and they're not even aware of what that's created. Like it's like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to be boss bitch, super independent, and it's successful. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's like, well, when you get to that, you're not an island. You're like outside of what you're aware of. Even if you're crushing it, you're like super successful. There are things that like other people know that you don't know, and there's other ways that you can be helped and supported. And if you allow yourself to do that, it's almost as if like independence is the new codependence. It's like, you know, we become hyper independent. We don't want to rely on people because we sort of grew up in an environment where we didn't have someone to rely on. And the male role model figure, like the father, I reckon is so much easier to rely on if we have him there in that situation, if he has the emotional intelligence, because he doesn't have the same sort of reaction that the mum has for us when we're kids, whether we're boy or a girl, because we have the same nervous system as our mums, right? So when I get stressed and I'm 1, 2, 3 years old, my mum feels that so much more.
Yeah.
But my dad, he can sort of think more clearly because I didn't come out of him, right? So that's why I think that, you know, both parent figures play such an important role. And I think a lot of us have missed that, whether we missed it from not having an actual dad present, or there was a dad there that just has no idea that like his emotions are in the driver's seat, and he's like heaps of guys bottled up rage, like, you know, because they're like so afraid of hurting the people they care for the most. But at the same time, they have learned that that's not okay. Like that's a bad thing to be angry but like if you and I are in a relationship, Shana, like and you say or do something, there's like it can never be 100% of the time you're not going to say or do something that I get annoyed about. Like that's just, we're imperfect humans, and we're going to find out, oh, that irritates me for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to be able to like channel that and use that in a productive way. And most people haven't. So what are they left with? This skill. It's a skill, and it takes a lot of energy to actually stop from feeling that, right? And then you know what happens then? Oh, why are you talking to me? Why are you being all quiet? You know, or it's because I'm trying to hold in this sort of anger I don't want to hurt you with. But then when you're like talking to me, then I'm like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like people are doing the best they can
100%.
with what they're aware of, but there are just tools. Like for me, like I'm like, there's something like with my goals right now, I'm like, there's something that I don't even know that exists that's just going to massively help me move towards what I want to right now. Right. So I seek mentoring all the time. I'm constantly asking questions and stuff. And I think a lot of people sort of close off. Like one of the things that I notice in people who make much better results, who get much better results, is that they have this attitude of asking so many questions. I've always seen that in my like semi-professional like sporting career and with other athletes. Like I've worked with some athletes as well, but also in relationships. It's like the more questions you ask, I just see their progress skyrockets. So people need to develop that attitude of excellence, because it's like, you know, if you go and then ask for advice or someone starts helping you and they have the exact result you want, well, your progress is going to massively decrease or increase based off of how many questions you ask, and well, quality and quantity, right? Like the quality of question you know to ask and the quantity, right? So like literally if someone comes to me and they're like, okay, I've got this exact problem. How do I change this? And how do I get back to the situation where we're smiling and we're laughing and we're having fun and we have balance, we're delegating responsibilities, all this sort of stuff. I'm like, cool, do this, this, and this. They go and do it. But
Amazing.
like, so much faster.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. Having that awareness, having that support, it really changes a lot. Yeah, incredible. Thank you for answering that. There were some brilliant points in there. And yeah, already my mind is like, wow, this stuff it's big. Like it's so valuable how, yeah, having this awareness around relationship, having this awareness around your own triggers, taking ownership, the emotional intelligence that you spoke about, because it's such a big area. We're not taught how to healthily process emotions or what to do with emotions. So we just end up projecting it all over the place. And this can be why there can be difficulties in relationships at times. But the more aware of that you are, the more you can take that self-responsibility and that ownership and communicate about things clearly, the more it can just change the game. So 100%.
Yeah. And even like we don't talk about the differences between men and women, like the, you know, to deal with stress or be able to like deal with stressful emotions as a kid, a girl actually like her brain is more programmed to be able to like talk it out, and then a boy's brain is like more programmed to go and move his body.
Yeah.
Right? It's easier to move your body than it is to talk something out. Like if I'm scared, then I might be scared to talk, right? But if I'm scared, I can go and run away. Like that's the fear response of my nervous system. So I feel like even like a boy / you know, becomes a man could have an advantage of how to actually process more, especially if we've got, you know, a lot of people, women or men, that aren't really moving that much, and they get stuck in their head, and they're not talking something out, or they might have learned a different way. And so then the other thing is, and this is like, I spend a lot of time, I'm in a unique position where my daughter's 3, my son's 5 months old, but some of my mentors, I have about 4 mentors that are, one's a child and adult psychologist, and he has taught me that, you know, the problems that you'll see with a child, like with a toddler, is really just playing out as an adult in a child's body when they are stressed, or basically the recurring problem is coming from what happened there. And I've learned that, you know, ideally there's this thing called the circle of security. right? It's a model that's been created. Have you heard of it before?
Yeah, I think there's a book you recommended to Ryan about raising a secure child, which talks all about the circle of security. Yeah.
Yeah. So the people who wrote that book, they researched for 40 years on attachment theory, which is the theory of, and I feel like saying this as well, and just talk it out, even though you're aware of it, because so many people aren't. Like, I
Yeah,
spoke
the
to
listeners will benefit.
a friend who's like super financially successful, and he's talking about his daughter, and he's like, "I believe this is how we should raise her." And I'm like, "Well, have you heard of this and attachment theory?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Oh man, it's like, it should be taught in schools, like." Anyway, they wrote this book, and then the model came out of that, which is like, if you can picture, on the left side there's the parent, and then on the right side there's the child, and then there's an arrow like pointing over to the child. When the child's away from the parent on that right side, that's evidence they feel safe and they're exploring. And it's the same thing with us, right? As adults, right? If we're exploring out of our comfort zone, then we feel safe enough to do that. But then the arrow that points back down to the parent, the reason that happens is because they feel unsafe and they need their emotions organized. So in order to do that, a parent needs to be attuned to their own emotions so that they can then attune to their child. So there's like two skills there. But once again, like, I come back to parents, single mothers raising kids after the war, super stressed, super understandable, that they were never able to, it was super scary to stop and go, okay, what am I feeling in my body? How can I identify what that is? What do I need to do in order to take care of that first? And then we just had all of the kids just watching them and dealing with it in the same way. We had kids who were, they didn't get those emotions organized for them. And so that's what's in the driver's seat for so many of us in relationships. And so this model is just so important. And so I know also that when she comes to me, there's about 5 reasons, right? She's either exhausted, or she's scared, or she's hurt, or she's angry, or she needs her emotional cup filled. Like, it's really, so I can literally go through that checklist because I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And this is the same with adults. It's like those 5 things. It's like emotional cup is really what love languages is. It's like, oh, I need you to talk to me. That person who says I need you to talk to me, they might just need to like sit there next to the person, and for a period of time, for that emotional cup to be filled. And a lot of the time in the relationships, the first thing we'll do is go to our partner and say, oh, I need this, because we haven't learned how to give it to ourselves. And that is the moment when, kind of our partner might feel like a bit more, coerced or controlled into doing something. Whereas if we can learn how to give those things to ourselves first, and then secondly go to our partner, then we maintain that individuality, and our partner is like more likely to be welcoming us with open arms to help, etc., because they're seeing that example. And the thing we forget is, like, I've spoken about modeling, like, as kids, we're seeing our parents, like, how they stand, how they breathe, everything. We repeat that behavior, but we forget that we're repeating it as adults as well. So, like, even how my partner is, like, what they're saying with their tonality, how loud they're being, or what their face looks like, what that expression means to me, all of these things, like, I'm going to model that back, unless I have a new tool, I learn some new information, I get new help, advice in order to respond differently. But we'll just keep doing the same thing. Does that make sense?
It does, definitely. It makes so much sense. And yeah, that whole like repetition until we know better, and being a pass down from our parents and generations as well, because they're obviously getting it passed down from their parents. And it just makes so much sense. Yeah. Beautiful. I'd love to hear a little bit more. How did you get interested in all of this? How did you start to learn so much about relationships and how we can change our lives and revolutionize our relationships?
Yeah, I had a huge background in physical training, loved sport, and very active growing up. And I wasn't very academic. And a funny little caveat, like, when I was in grade 10, my mum said, I'll get you a Sony PlayStation you know, the game, if you get 5 A's, and I was getting all D's and C's except sport, like PE, physical education, which was like 1 grade A, the rest was like C's, D's, and E's. That last semester on my report card, it shows like all C's, D's, and E's for 4 years straight, 8 semesters, and the last semester is 6 A's and 1 B or C or something.
Wow.
PlayStation. But that shows where like, so that says a lot about me, because I am just like so passionate and have this massive thirst for like knowledge and applying that since I left school. I went on my own personal journey because I actually found out that I loved learning, but the way that I was like taught, or I was forced to learn, or what I was forced to learn about, was all wrong. Like, you know, school teaches us how to lose our creativity, most of the government schooling anyway. So that's a big part of it. And I just got really curious about me, about other people. And I love people, super fascinated about people. And also the reason I mentioned the physical activity is because like throughout my 20s, I was like, why do I have such great physical health, but I'm miserable and I'm acting like desperate around women, and I can't maintain a great relationship. Like before my wife, the longest relationship I'd had was like 5 months, and before that it was just, you know, really fleeting. And looking back now, I realized what I was doing, like sleeping around, and like it was a way of me connecting, but without getting too intimate. Like I could get intimate and then I could leave, and then I would find something wrong with the woman if I was the one who would break up with them. It was because I was just in constant judgment of myself. I was constantly judging myself because, and a lot of the people I commonly work with are high achievers, and the common theme that I see, that I saw in myself as well, is like, we learn as high achievers is like, if I'm not accomplishing something, because that was where I got all my attention from parents, not through any fault of their own, that when I'm not achieving something, I need to hide that. That's something I should be ashamed about, whether we're aware of it or not. We just get so hyper focused in that. So I went through this whole like personal like death inside, like inside of me, where I had the entrepreneurial success, high achiever, like, you know, built my business to where I was like, you know, on my laptop and by the beach with my fiance at the time. And I was so fucking like depressed and like just lost. And I realized that I wasn't Darren, the high achiever. I was the high achiever with a little bit of Darren. And so it's like, if I wasn't achieving something, if I wasn't helping someone, then I was like worthless. I was like, I didn't believe that I was, if I wasn't needed, you know, I didn't believe that there was any point of me existing, etc. So I went through this massive like grieving process of me as a kid, where I was like, I'm achieving all these things, like winning the sporting competitions, and then, you know, I joined the military, and then I start the business successfully, and blah blah blah, and all that like came crashing down when I just slowed down. And so that was a real big turning point, where I met a mentor, Alice Hammerlane, and taught me so much about mindset, relationships. I did a lot of like training and apply that, and started to notice how like, I was sabotaging relationships, like professional relationships, friendships, personal relationships. And the reason I'm super passionate about relationships, which is what I said to you before, was like, the relationship is a complete reflection of myself, of ourselves. Like, it's like, and because of the model that I teach, that this is the structure of all life. It's like best friends, lovers, and parents. Best 3 components in best friends are play, trust, and creativity. So it's like, show me how much play, trust, and creativity you have with the people in your life, whether it's in your, you know, professional friends or your personal relationship. I'll show you how much of that you have with yourself. Like, show me how much. And then love, the 3 components are like romance, intimacy, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. Lovemaking, because intimacy and lovemaking are different, right? Intimacy can just be like, I think a lot of guys want heaps of sex, but they actually just want to be emotionally intimate. They actually want that moment where they feel super safe in their body, instead of just, you know, feeling like their cocks, you know, really like they feel heaps of energy channeled into there because they're so uneducated about sex. Like, I picked up porn magazine. That was my education when I was like a kid. That like, that's our easiest way to connect to our body. But I think if a man can sit with a woman, he can tell something to her that he hasn't told anyone, that he was super like trying to hide. I mean, that's my experience. And I've heard it with other guys as well who are great leaders, that the moment that they said that thing to their partner, to her, that it was a whole new level of intimacy and trust that they had in the relationship.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to me. So that's another way of like, I'm developing more self-acceptance for myself as well. So once again, show me how much love, intimacy, love making you have externally. I'll show you how much you have internally. Like barely any guys actually just touch their body without touching their genitals. Like to actually connect to their body. It's such a rare thing that I never knew about until learning more tools and realizing, oh, you know, when I want to smack her ass, it's because I want to smack my ass. It's actually because like I just want to give myself, I like that touch. You know, I was getting massage yesterday and she's like massaging my glutes, my ass. I'm like, this feels so good. It wasn't even a sexual way at all. I'm like, I'm not like getting aroused or anything. I was like, I'm like, this just feels so good in a totally like platonic, neutral way. And I'm like, that's the thing that so many people miss out, because I think we're like hyper aroused because we just think we're only getting that outside of ourselves. Like I remember having this moment when we were having sex, and I'm not going to get too in detail, but it was just like, I'm like, the good feeling that I have right now, I'm creating that. And that was like a year or two ago, you know, like, so I spent so long like chasing women, being intimate, whatever, in relationships. And the whole time I'm like, oh, you know, this feels so good and I need her here. But just that awareness of the separation of, I'm creating this feeling. It's just a sensation that I'm having, but I'm creating this feeling. It's super powerful. And I think it creates so much of like the belief that we need, and the acting as if this is true, which is, I don't need anything from you, you know. That's where a lot of the conflict comes from. So it's like, how can I become an individual that then can still say I need you, but I need you comes from totally different intention. It's not I need you because like there's this lack of something. I have everything I need, but I need you to work together with me on this, right? And then the third identity is parenting. It's like, you know, the parent identity is the mentoring. Whenever you give anyone advice, I give someone advice, instantly put my mentor / parent hat on. It's the same thing. So I coached a CEO guy who's he's got no kids. He wants to have kids, wants to get in a relationship, have kid. He's got 100 staff. I'm like, you're already a parent. I know you're going to be a great parent because you have been wearing that hat. It's exactly the same thing. And once again, show me how you can give advice, or sometimes say, or not give advice and say, how would you like me to support you in this moment? Somebody's, I just want you to listen, you know? That's also another thing. Like when my daughter's screaming on the ground, if I tell her to calm down, she'll escalate even more. We don't want that. You know, when we're stressed, when we're emotional, we actually need an opportunity for just someone to stay close. And she says, get away, get away. And I, just because of my understanding, I actually need to stay close, far away enough that she feels comfortable. She might even still be saying, get away. But I actually need to stay close because she needs to know that however she's feeling, especially when she's like super angry, that I'm never leaving her. And so counterintuitive to like what she's saying, because that's her reaction. But that's the kid inside all of us when we're like, I want to push this person away, when what we really actually want is we want them to unconditionally accept us, which means that they love us. They show us by, I'm not going anywhere. You can go batshit crazy and I'm still going to be here, you know? And that's the structure of everything. That's why I'm super passionate about it. Because once I learned that model, I live that. So I can, whatever problem I've got, I'll be like, okay, cool. How does this come back to me? And I can resolve this and go, okay, like I'm super stressed about this or whatever, or what's the thing that I need to go and do in order to resolve this, to then go and even do better or accomplish this to take my relationship to the next level. Like I have the tools now, rather than going, fuck, I can't solve this because I literally don't know how to resolve it for myself.
That's really powerful, like taking that self-responsibility and ownership and looking at how is this reflecting back at me and what do I need to do? Like where do I need to tweak something or give myself some love or meet one of my own needs, rather than always looking to the external, which you're so right. We can so often turn to others to meet all of our needs. When we do create all of the feelings within us, we can fill up so many of our own needs. And then it's a bonus to get the other needs met from partners and friends and family and all of that. But yeah, starting with us is so, so important.
Yeah. Like, you know, that Jerry Maguire moment where you complete me, where he says you complete me. Like, I always, like, as soon as I got together with Jess, I said, I don't believe in that shit. Like, you don't complete me, you compliment me.
Yes,
and
I love that.
Yeah, and that was like, it's such a small thing to say, but it's super pivotal just to even voice that. Like, I think the other thing that we don't do in relationships is we're like, I said to her as well, I'm like, we are going to say something that will result in each of us hurting, being in pain, like emotional pain. And so let's talk about how we'll navigate that now. You know, we just wait until we explode and erupt together, and then wonder why, it's turned out the same way. You know, but that also comes to having the guts to say those things and bring them up without you know, being afraid of how the person is going to react, or even taking responsibility for how they're going to react. You know, if I don't want to say something because I think you're going to react a certain way, well, I actually don't know how you're going to react. So I'm thinking what's best for you and believing that I know what's better for you.
Yeah.
How could I ever know that? You know?
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And on that note of like being able to communicate with people, and even I love how you had that conversation before a trigger came up in the relationship. You're like, we're going to say something that's going to upset each other. How are we going to deal with that? That in itself, that's so powerful and potent. And Ryan and I always say that one of our superpowers is our ability to communicate and have the hard conversations when things come up. So what are your tips around really being able to have those kinds of conversations and bring up things like what you did with Jess and be like, okay, this is going to happen. It's a relationship. It's inevitable. Life, like good and bad things are going to happen. There's going to be times where we're triggered. And just having conversations like that to be able to put that best foot forward and be able to prepare for when stuff does come up down the track. Like, what would you recommend for people who are listening?
Let's talk about, like, let's say 3 keys to calm conflict. Let's talk about this. So we're going to talk about awareness, environment, and let's make an easy one to remember. ACE. So awareness, communication, and environment. So the first one, awareness, is that you want the problems that you have. You if you don't have your dream relationship, or you're having that conflict, you would think, yeah, okay, from the dream relationship, I'm going to gain calm, I'm going to gain relaxation, I'm going to gain clarity, I'm going to gain, you know, the freedom to say what I want. You're also going to lose the conflict. You're going to lose the sadness or the anger, and that might have been very commonly what you grew up with, right? So you're actually going to lose all of the things that you relate to belonging to your initial family. So to know that you want the problems you have will actually allow you to actually probably settle how you're feeling a bit. And that's massively helped me to go, I want this, you know, I want this because this is what mum and dad used to do. Dad would blow up, or mum would get annoyed because dad said something, etc. Right? So my process is unraveling that, and also like choosing my own new sense of belonging, right? So that's the first thing, awareness. So we want to just expand your awareness as much as possible. And also think another thing, you know, we just spoke about expanding awareness from information, but think about time. Like 10,000 years from now, nobody will know you existed. Nobody knows you existed. There's like an Egyptian tomb from 2,000 years ago. No one knows the dude's name, right? So will this conflict matter, right? And that can help change how you feel, just from those two things of perspective. We know that your perspective can change how you feel, so that's important. And then environment is, never have conflict in small spaces. These companies that have these conversations, performance reviews with staff, etc., or giving negative feedback, they have in these small little offices, and people blow up because when someone's angry, what do they need the most? They need physical space. They want to push everything external away, right? So
Yeah.
if we want to have a crucial conversation, I'll tell you what I did yesterday. We had date day, and I booked a restaurant by the beach looking out to the ocean so we can see wide open space, because I know the opposite of that when we're stressed is we get tunnel vision. So the opposite will be we'll be able to use all of our brains, because we were having like a goal setting session, make sure that we're eating, so we're fed, because being hungry is literally just, some people just depressed because they're not eating in the morning first thing.
Yeah.
So getting enough sleep. We know, like Jordan Peterson says that all the time, you just need to eat and get 8 hours sleep, and a lot of people just depression's gone. So that's environment, right? So think wide open spaces and something fun and playful, and that comes back to that best friends components, like I said, fun, playfulness. So we have fun when we're eating together. We love, we're passionate about food, and then we're also like in that creative space. And when you have play, you have trust anyway, so we need to worry about that component, which is seeing kids all the time. So that's awareness, that's environment. And then communication is knowing the words to say. So it's one thing that's called a soft start is a great thing to use. Soft start is when you actually you have the conversation about the conversation. You say, I want to have a conversation that I'm like a little bit uncomfortable to have, or I don't know how it's going to go, and I want to know that we can have this conversation. And so when is a good time for you to have this conversation? So you can even like check in if the person is like ready, because we don't know. Sometimes our partner's like super stressed about something that we weren't even aware of, right? And they're not ready to have that conversation. It's the same with a friend, where we need to say like, I'm not available to be have emotional dump or hear about all your shit, So many of us don't know about vicarious trauma. Like you can vicariously experience trauma, stressful situations just by hearing a story. Which is why I wish my wife would stop watching serial killer documentaries, listen to podcasts.
Not ideal.
So communication, the soft start is first. And then I feel like I've done this a bunch of times and with clients and everything. I think the easiest way is to just give examples. It's like, hey, I want to know if can we have this conversation, or when can we have this conversation? And then like always start with appreciation, understanding, or respect. Give one of those three things before anything else, because the reason that we would ever, conflict is actually just misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And if you just picture something now, like if this is me on the left, I'm standing here on the edge of a cliff, and this is my partner on the right, on the other cliff. We're on the edge of cliff. There's no gap. We can't see from each other's perspective, right? We're looking at each other, but we can't see through each other's eyes. What we can see from that perspective, maybe we can hear the same, but where we're standing from as well. So what we need is a bridge to connect us, and then we can stand underneath each other, right? And see from the same perspective. So the way that we do that is we show appreciation, respect, or understanding. Like, what is something I understand about you already? What's something I respect about you? And even better, I respect things you do rather than just like who you are, but an action that you take. Because love is a verb. I've had a client who like believed in love and was being treated like shit. That's not love, right? It's love. That's an infatuation with the illusion of needing somebody, like we spoke about, right? Like, because that person hasn't learned how to give themselves through actions that love that they want to feel. And then that appreciation. What do I appreciate right now? And you always have something to appreciate with your partner, because you never would have got together because you fell in love with what was both important to you, and then you were curious and interested about what is different that is not important to each of you. So you've got about 5 things that are important to you that control all of the things you do. So for me and Jess, when we got together, it's like we like moving and health. Are you interested in that? We're interested in entrepreneurship. We're interested in parenting, mentorship. Like her role and my role were both that. And then we wanted to have 2 kids, parenting, mentorship, like I said, same thing.
Yeah.
We had those 3 values, but then she valued yoga, a little bit different. I was like, oh, she valued clothes and renovating. None of that shit's important to me, but I'm curious about that. And I choose to be interested in that because I'm interested in her and I want to find out what's important about that to her. And actually, you know, if we do marry our unconscious mind or in a relationship with our unconscious mind, which Jung, the famous psychologist, said, then unconsciously I do value those things.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of it yet. I'm not feeling that. So if I trust and and this is what unconditional love is, to contribute, is I'm going to do something for you that I don't value and I can't see, and that means that I can't get anything in return.
Yeah.
That's true contribution. That's an act of unconditional love. That's what we need to learn. And it's so subtle that, like, I've noticed times in the past where, like, I want to give her a massage, and then I noticed I got annoyed because she didn't want to be intimate afterwards. I didn't want to make love. So that wasn't an act of unconditional love. The condition for me, without even realizing it until afterwards, was, if I massage you and you feel good, like, and I'm turned on, let's do this, you know? But it was all about me. So I didn't ask her. I didn't say, I want to do this thing for you because I just want to, that's for you. No, there was something in it for me first. And I didn't even realize that until afterwards. But that's what we do. And that's why it's so important to communicate. Here are the key questions. And these are the key things that are most important in an ideal relationship that I teach my clients, which is, what has to happen for you to feel 10 out of 10 contributed? You know, how do you get treated when you feel 10 out of 10 contributed? And people need to go and find that out. Like, if you ask your partner, they might not even know. They don't even know the questions to ask. What has to happen for you to have 10 out of 10 sex? You know, because that's the next important value. That's healing. You know, it's not just for our enjoyment. That's part of our healing, stress release, better sleep. And then what has to happen for you to have 10 out of 10 fun?
Yeah.
I got Jess and I to create a list of all the things we did when we were a kid. That was super fun. We went to the water slides the other week for our date day, and we're recreating, you know, because that shows us where we're really truly authentic to the things that make us, that we just purely loved. And then growth is the fourth thing that's most important. What has to happen for you to have 10 out of 10 growth? And then passion is the culminated most important thing out of all of those living together. So, you know, tell me about a time you were most passionate. And then we extract, like, what was happening, what you're seeing, what you're hearing in that experience. Let's go and create that again in different ways.
Amazing. So would you say they're like the 5 keys to a healthy relationship, or?
5 keys from everything that I've learned. You know, I've done training, but then my personal experience applying those 5 keys and to my clients, they create that ideal relationship. They eliminate the drama. You know, sure, there's still conflict, but they're able to work through it in a healthy way, because, you know, contribution, and the way I said those, you think of it like a pyramid. Like, the wider a base is on a pyramid, right, it can then support the next one. Contribution is like that big slab, like that big level, that first piece of the structure that then supports sex, intimacy, love making, which is the one next important thing. And then fun, growth, passion, like that goes up like that. So we need to, when we find out our strategies, because that's what will create that dream relationship. Because there's only 2 reasons a relationship will fail. It's, we either have a strategy that doesn't get us the result we want, and everything's a strategy. So how we're feeling. So if someone thinks, oh, only negative things can come from being sad, angry, whatever, then they'll never be able to feel sad, angry, and then turn that into a positive in the relationship, in their life, right? And then the other reason is they are, like, we're either having unfulfilled or fulfilled strategy. Same, but like very similar, right? I'm doing something, my partner's doing something that results in me feeling unfulfilled. And so that's why self-awareness is so powerful. Understanding ourselves. When we understand ourselves, to the degree we understand ourselves, is to the degree that we understand others, our partner. If we feel fulfilled, then we'll be able to create that for the other person. Because when I feel safe enough from being fulfilled, I'll get curious about you. I'll stop focusing on me and go, oh, what do you do to be fulfilled? I'm super curious, you know, because now I feel safe. I was able to create that for myself through my actions and my body. Cool. Now it'll just naturally happen.
Yeah, makes so much sense. And do you have any like quick tips for people to build that self-awareness?
quick tips to build that self-awareness? Great question.
I feel like there's many things we can do.
Mhm.
But yeah, anything that comes to mind straight up.
Yeah. Just thinking about like what was the thing that probably built my self-awareness the most. I would say broadly generalizing to make the most impact in saying one thing is journaling. Just
Yeah.
writing down why did I react like this?
Yeah.
What was I feeling? And what was I needing? What was I learning? Yeah, that's a really good thing. Okay, there's key principles that help me continue to expand my self-awareness. One of them was how I said, like, how am I relating to myself as a best friend or a lover or a parent?
Yep.
Those three ways. But then the other thing is that if we're experiencing drama or we've got problems, super stressed, there's only two reasons. It's either fear or ignorance. So I'm experiencing that. First, I'll get myself out of the environment.
Yeah.
Because I can't think straight. I need to get out of the environment. So I'm no longer feeling that or as intensely, and ask myself, what am I afraid of? What am I not aware of?
Yeah.
But by me asking myself what I'm afraid of, I actually become aware
Yeah.
of what I was ignoring, right?
Yeah.
I asked a client last week, she's in a relationship, they've got two kids, and she's like, I want to have my own time. I want to find me again. And we wrote down this massive list of the things she does all week. And she's like, he doesn't know what it's like for me. And I said, okay, so what if he did that for a week? And she's like, oh, I don't want to give that to him because he'd stuff it up. Okay. All right. So how do you feel like about all that? She's frustrated. I said, okay, with my experience, frustration hides fear, right? Frustration is fear's mask. It's fear's armor. So if it was, I'm curious, what would be your fear? She stopped for a moment and she said, fear of not being needed. If I didn't do anything, I wouldn't be needed.
Yeah.
That's the first time she ever realized that, right? And so then she became aware of that. So now she realizes she wants the problem she has, like and she says, oh yeah, so like now I need to relinquish that. I need to relinquish those responsibilities and learn, which brings me to the next point, that the only two principles of growing in any way is love and education.
Yeah.
Either not loving, and acceptance presupposes love. So we're not accepting, which means that we love behavior that we see. We relate that back to ourselves, not loving that behavior within ourselves, or we're not educated.
Yeah.
So we're either learning to love or learning something else that we've never learned before.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest, and I have that as a visual model that I give to all my clients. Like, this is how all your problems, your stress, your drama happens. Fear and ignorance happens from those. So, and that's about the relationship with yourself, right? I don't even need to tell anyone else what my fear is, but even just to like stop and slow down, take a deep breath, write it out. What are my fears?
Yeah.
It's massive, right?
Powerful stuff.
Because the fear is actually just of the unknown.
Yeah.
Now I know it. I can work with it, right?
Yeah, it's not so scary anymore.
Yeah, like I think one of the best things that I've learned and that I teach is like I can use fear as a tool, right? As a motivational tool rather than letting it control me because I'm not even aware that it is.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing. I love that. And it's funny when you said journaling, because that's literally what I had in my mind as well. I was like, I feel like journaling's a big one. And then you said it. But yeah, this has all been so potent and so insightful, and I'm conscious of time, so we can wrap it up here. But thank you so much for sharing all that you shared, those incredible models, the keys to a healthy relationship. There was a lot in this. It's something I know I'm going to go back and listen to, and I'm sure the listeners will be the same. So thank you so much for being here. Last question, rapid fire. Where can the listeners find you and continue learning from you?
I love Instagram, Darren J. Bruce. You can search me, Darren J. Bruce, or my website's darrenbruce.com.au.
Amazing. And I'll pop those in anything I share on the show notes as well, so everyone can find them in there. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for being here today, Darren. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you, and I look forward to connecting again in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks, Shahna.